Hey everybody, and welcome to Module 2. In this module, we're going to be looking at how co-teaching can be used to support students who are at transition age, looking at the role of related services during transition process, and summarizing your understanding of what career readiness can look like, including working with paraprofessionals as we move through this process. Some of us are fortunate to have great paraprofessionals or instructional assistants working with us. Others are not so blessed, but this will walk us through that process of working with other people. So within this module, you're going to hopefully check the announcement several times and complete the readings and activities in the Advanced Organizer. You'll also be completing the discussion board A that you started in Module 1. If you haven't yet gotten your textbook, chapters 2 and 3 are uploaded. Keep in mind this is the last week that textbooks chapters will be uploaded because this is all that we can share based on copyright law. So you'll need to have your own textbook by the time you start Module 3. In your discussion board this week, we're responding to peers from our prompt from last week, where you're sharing not only and learning about each other and where you're working, what schools you are currently with or you plan to be with if you are still an undergraduate at EKU. If you are currently working with students with disabilities who are transition age, then I'd like you to share with us more about your learning with those students. If not, then tell us what you plan or would hope to do if you were teaching students with disabilities who are transition age. So as you think through the 3 parts that you responded to last week, this week you're going back into your peers' posts and reading what they've said about themselves and expanding on what they've shared. So if they've told you a little bit about how they work with students who are in high school, then I would ask some questions or share some of your own experiences. Or if they have told you some really great things about their thoughts on the role of teachers working with local community agencies, maybe you can share a resource that you have in your community that they might want to explore. If you did not get to fully share for parts 1, 2, and 3 in your initial post, remember that you can always reply to your own initial post and add content, and I will count all of that when I am grading your posts. I'll look at your initial post, any extra information you added, and then all of your responses to peers. That all goes into your grade. So let's look for just a few seconds at the Advanced Organizer for this week, Advanced Organizer 2. And let me expand that a little bit so we see it a little bit better. So you're going to start, not at the end, let's start at the very beginning by looking at co-teaching. And some of us have lots of experience with co-teaching and have been co-teaching for years. Others of you, this is a relatively new concept. So I've got some great videos that are embedded, including a real-world example of co-teaching that I'd like you to check out. And what I want you to be thinking about as you're watching them is, how can this concept help me support students who are a transition age? So if I'm in an ideal teaching setting and I'm a special education teacher working with a general education teacher and we are co-teaching middle school students or high school students, what can we be doing as adults to help students better prepare once they are no longer in school? As you're looking at those real world examples, again, I want you to apply that to your own potential teaching experience. So whether you are currently co-teaching or not co-teaching, still share how you could be successful if you had that perfect setup in place. Looking at the co-teaching models, I want you to talk about models that would be beneficial. What I don't want you to talk about, so avoid one teach, one assist, and one teach, one observe. These models should just be used very rarely, and they're not great models for our students to get the most impact for learning. So please focus on team teaching, focus on parallel teaching, focus on station teaching. How could you use these concepts to support students? Just avoid the first two, one teach, one assist, one teach, one observe. Use the other models. There are tons and tons of fantastic co-teaching videos. So I'd like you to go into YouTube and search for some co-teaching videos that are of interest to you and then sum up what you've learned. Make sure to copy your live link here so that we can go back and view them. And this is a great thing to share in discussion board and your responses to peers. Say, hey, I watched this great video on co-teaching. I think it will be really beneficial based on the goals that you shared. So after you look at co-teaching, the next thing I want you to do is look at the Kentucky guidance documents for OT, or occupational therapy, PT, which is physical therapy, and SLP, which is speech and language pathology, in Kentucky schools. And we also have a resource manual. Check out these two documents that talk about the roles of related services and what we can do. Related service providers are fantastic resources when we're looking at transition services. So we want to make sure that we fully understand their roles in the IEP process and the ARC process and what they can bring to the table when we're looking at transition services. So share what you've learned. And then next I want you to start thinking about families. So we've looked at co-teaching or our other professionals. We've looked at related services. Now let's look at families. Kentucky Transition Resources have some fantastic links that will be helpful for families. There's also some other great resources from NCSET that gives some great guidance that we can use to look at how team members can support the transition process. And I want you to specifically think about people you would not normally invite. You know, we're really good at remembering to invite OT, PT, and speech. We're really good at making sure we have the right general education teacher at the meeting. That would be in a student's area of disability and have knowledge of the student, but we don't always think outside the box when we look at transition services. This Journey to Adulthood manual has some great resources we can share with family. And Parent Center Hub, which used to be the Nietzsche resources, has great information. So share what you've learned there. And I want you also to think about resources in other languages. If you haven't done any research in this area, Colorado, there we go, is a website that has fantastic resources for students who are English learners and their families. So I'd recommend you checking out there. But as you've looked at these resources, see if you notice anything in Spanish, in Mandarin, in any language that you feel like your students might speak, their families might speak. Did you find any resources that were beneficial? There are some prompts that as you read chapter 2 and look at career development, and as you read chapter 3 and think about career planning, to kind of guide your thoughts there. And then as you're kind of wrapping up your learning, there's a TEC article on the role of paraprofessionals or instructional assistants and how we as certified teachers can appropriately work with them so that they can support transition needs. So share what you've learned there. Alrighty, I've tied this module and all of our modules back into some of our bigger learning objectives, as well as the learning objectives that you've seen in the module. So kind of think through if you feel like you're mastering those concepts and let me know if you have any more questions. Happy learning!